Going to I'm going to shut off my webcam now and turn it over to Eric, and we'll start our broadcast.
Great. Well, thanks, Dave. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this AGU Pathfinder webinar featuring David Harwell. So I'm Eric Hankin, the Student Programs Manager at AGU, and I'll be your host for today's webinar titled Finding Your Fit. So first off, some housekeeping items. If you have questions during the presentation today, feel free to type them into the question box in the right side control panel, and we'll get to as many as we can at the conclusion of the presentation. Additionally, Dave's going to ask for you to reply to some questions of his own during the webinar. So please type your responses into the question box. I guess it's kind of like Jeopardy, right? You're going to answer with a question. You'll answer the question box as well for his the questions he'll have for you. And finally, the link to the online recording. This is always a question that folks have. The link to the archived recording will be sent to all webinar attendees in a follow-up email in a few days. So presenting today's webinar is Dr. David Harwell. Dave is the Assistant Director for Talent Pool at AGU, where he oversees our student, career, and education programs. Today, he's going to discuss the many things to consider when charting your career path. So if you're still a student, a recent graduate, or you're a working professional thinking of making a change, you'll still find all of the content in today's webinar very useful. Additionally, there is a companion piece in this month's issue of EOS. The direct link to the article will be included in the follow-up email with the recording. And you can also just go on eos.org and look for the Finding Your Fit article at your own leisure. And with that, I'll pass the mic over to you, David. Take it away.
Great, thank you very much, Eric. And so let's get started. Today is really about you and figuring out where we're going to help you. So we're not going to tell you, but we're going to help you figure out where you fit in the Earth and Space Sciences. So let's start by going over the agenda. Okay, so the first part of the webinar is going to be introspective. We're going to talk about what you want to do. We're going to look at some of your drivers and your skills. And then we'll look at some job possibilities. So it's back to you. You're going to have to work all day today. That's just the way it is. So what I want you to do is to type into the question panel the type of job you want. So where do you want to work? And what type of job would you want? So I'm watching the question box now, waiting for your responses to roll in. I'm not seeing any so far, but I hope that you will type those in, or it may be a very long webinar. Okay, here we go. We've got a few. So postdoc, PhD, career exploration beyond academia, so something outside of academia. Hands-on field work, no office jobs. Okay, I got you, Savannah. Anything research-based, that's from Nima. And Kendra wants a job that allows her to travel and climb volcanoes. So volcanology would be a good thing. She's getting her PhD in volcanology, so that's a good thing. Georgiana is looking at academia. Kim, science communicator in the earth sciences. That's a good one. Jennifer is looking for academia or industry. I guess either one would fit. And then Carlos is looking for academia or government. Kate says maybe as a program manager at a foundation, so that's good. Hannah says a research position in a laboratory, possibly a university or industry. Donna's saying research-based, that's good. Cecilia would like to work in either the Western U.S. or overseas, so she knows where, and is looking for hands-on field work, something research-driven. Teresa says research and travel are important to her, and Trinity is looking for field work or research. Well, so we have quite a variety of descriptions of what people want to do, and so I'm going to go through maybe the levels, the specificity of the jobs. So if you were level 1, that would be very, very specific. That would mean that you would know exactly the type of job, and in fact, you probably know exactly the job that you want. So for example, you might want to be the director of geophysics at a Ramco Services company. Type 2 is a little more general. So here, you know the sector, so whether it's industry, academia, government, nonprofit, and you know the generally about the job type. So an example is, I want to be an environmental scientist for a federal agency. Type 3, a little more general. Here you're relatively sure about the sector, so we saw a few of those, or maybe you know what area of the world you want to work in, but you're uncertain about the job type. So here, I want to work in industry. We heard a few that sounded like that. And maybe you just don't know. You just know you want a job. Now, it's important that we be at least a little bit specific, because if we're too broad, it looks like we don't know what we want. It looks like we're desperate. And so I'm going to tell you, this type 4 is probably not it. You know, if you just want a job, McDonald's is hiring, so you might want to consider that. We need you to be a little bit more specific, but how specific? Well, let's talk about that. I'm going to turn this back over to you, and actually I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who's going to ask you a question.
Okay, so it's poll time. This is my favorite time of the webinar. So how specific do you think your objective should be when searching for a job? You can choose only one, so type 1, very specific, type 2, specific, type 3, relatively specific, and type 4, unspecific. Some tongue twisters. You have a few more seconds to answer, and we'll close the poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, closing the poll. Okay, Dave, and the top 2 answers are type 2 and type 3. Type 2 was 60%, type 3 with 33%, and a few people chimed in with type 1.
Okay, yeah, and that's because this is a very smart crowd. So you should be in type 2, type 3, probably at this stage of your career. Looks like most of you are students or maybe postdocs, and so you're relatively inexperienced in terms of jobs. When do you think you'd go for type 1? You can type your response in the question box. I mean, there's only a few people that could go for type 1. What's the key factor there, do you think? So I'm waiting for you to type it into the question. Ah, there it is. Georgiana, I knew I could count on you. So experience. It's experience. So if you have all the experience in the world and you know that you have specific experience that applies towards a job that you're looking for, then you can say, that's my job, you know, and this is why you should hire me for it, right? But for most of us, at least on the front end of this process, when you're just graduating or when you're coming out of a postdoc, you don't know that. So you're probably going to be in type 2, type 3. Make sure that you know at least a little bit about what you want, or your resume and your other materials are going to look too unfocused. So we're going to help you today to go through a few factors, to consider a few factors about yourself so that you can get to type 2 or type 3. And some of you are already there. So we might move some of you from type 3 to type 2. Then again, maybe you're just fine where you are. Now, when you're looking for your fit, and this is the Venn diagram of life, you really have 3 things here to consider. What drives you? What's important to you? You also need to consider your skills. What do you do well? And not just what do you do well, but what actually do you do well that gives you energy? This is I'm going to use the Marcus Buckingham kind of definition here. And If you can do something well, but it sucks the living life out of you, that's not what we're talking about. That would be miserable. So what we really want are the things that you're good at and that give you energy. You love doing them. And then the third part that we're going to look at is the availability of jobs in that area. Because really you have to have all three to get a good fit. So we're looking at the intersection of all three of these vectors right there at the center, and that's our best fit. Now, if you don't have that, say you just have two, so we're looking at, for example, at the things that drive you. The job may fit that. It may also be available, but you don't have the skills to do it. Well, you're not going to do so well at it because you're going to be incompetent. So you might get the job, but you'll get fired. So let's not go there. Also, if you get to do the things that are important to you and you have the skills to do it, but there's no available job, well, that's just called a hobby because nobody's paying you for that. And if it aligns with your skills and there's a job available, but it's contrary to the things that drive you, like your ethics, you're going to be miserable at it. You may be able to succeed there for a short time, and sometimes we have to. Sometimes we have to take a job to get through the door, but we want to make sure that we don't spend a lot of time here because, quite frankly, if your heart's not in it, you're not going to do a good job at it, and it's just going to make you feel awful. So we're back to the best fit. We want to see if we can find something that matches our drivers, matches our skills, and where somebody's willing to pay us. So I'm going to go back to you in just a moment, and what I'm going to talk about are the drivers. And you're going to have to use the question box again because there are several of these. You know, it could be what is really important to you is altruism, giving back to others. Or maybe it's autonomy. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do. Or could it be life balance, a balance between your personal life and your business? Or do you want the corner office and the big title? Well, then it's all about advancement. There's also challenge and discovery. For some of you, money may be important. Structure, is it clearly defined what I'm supposed to do? Because I need to know that. Well, then that's a structured position. It's perfectionism. Maybe you just want to make sure you get it right. There are certain jobs that align with that. And then for some folks, it may be security. So just knowing that that paycheck's going to be there, that job's going to be there, there's not going to be a lot of disruption in your employment. So what I want you to do is type into the question box your number one. So out of this list, what's most important to you? Okay, so we have a few responses. Let's see. So we have money. Karen, you chose 4. I just need 1. So money, structure, security, balance. Let's say that those are in order and money's number 1 for you. Discovery, structure, challenge. Catherine's coming in with challenge. Kendra with discovery. Trinity with discovery. Leonardo with autonomy. Yeah, so I want to force you to go through this activity of prioritizing these drivers. And right now I'm just asking you for your top one, and I know I gave you a hard time, Karen, but really you did it right. You need to figure out what your top 2 or 3 are, and that's going to point you towards a job. If it's about altruism, then some forms of business you may not be into. If the business is going to work against the environment, or it's going to, it might be having a negative impact on certain people's lives, then you're not going to be satisfied with it if altruism is your first driver. On the other hand, if money is your first driver, well, then you need to go for the thing that will make you the most money. And so an industrial position is likely to have the highest potential. If money's number 1 for you, yeah, Nima, don't go into nonprofits. They call them nonprofits for a reason. That's because you're not going to be all that profitable. So what this should help you to, yeah, I see your comment. So what this should help you to do is to prioritize. So what type of position, what sector, academia, industry, government, nonprofit would you go into to be able to do what's most important to you, and then within that sector, what type of job. Okay, so great. Thanks for participating, everybody, in that one. And so now we're going to look at your skills. And okay, I see your question, Jurgana. So I'll get back to you in just a second. Let's talk about your skills next, though. So the ones that are up on the screen right now are actually the ones that employers say make first-year employees most successful. So if they see these characteristics in an employee, they can predict that they're very likely to be successful in the long run. But we know everybody's not good at everything. There are some things that maybe I can do, but I don't like to do them very much. So going back to that Marcus Buckingham kind of definition of what a strength is. So what I want you to do now is look at this list and figure out what's your top thing that you like. So in the question box, you can type like, colon, and then put your top one that you like. Then I also want you to figure out which one do you like the least. In fact, you may even hate it. So you can type hate, colon, and that one. All right, so there's two responses I want from you. One is the thing you like the most, and the other one is the thing you hate the most. Great. So I see him coming in. Donna, you're all about persistence. Great. Trinity, okay, that was pretty quick. You know that you love project management, and financial management is the thing you don't like so much. Okay, so why did I ask you to do like and hate or dislike? That's because when you're looking for a job, you're going to look for the job that you get to do what you like the most of the time. You may still have to do that thing you hate. You might still have to balance budgets every once in a while, but you don't want to become an accountant if you hate the financial part of it, right? You just want to minimize that part of the job or find a job where you don't have to. So they continue to come in. Nima, I see that you like system thinking, hate communications. Okay, we might have to work on that, but you're going to have to communicate with people sometimes, but we can find a job that you may not have to do it too much. Susanna, persistence, you love and dislike teamwork. So you'd want to look for a job where you're able to be an individual contributor, maybe where you do your own research, where you don't have to rely on others. Veronica, looks like you just said financial management. I'm assuming that's what you like, or I don't know, maybe that's what you don't like. Either way, it's good that you're taking a moment just to look at this. Now I'm going to circle back and answer a question about how do you balance between competing drivers. And I don't think you have to balance between them. What you have to do is just figure out what's most important to you. And you can have more than one. I asked you for one just a few moments ago, and right now I'm forcing you to rank your top and your bottom skill. But in reality, we're complex individuals. We have lots of things that we're good at, lots of things that we don't like, and we have drivers and interests that are going to be unique to us, and we're going to be a blend of those different characteristics. So it's important for you to understand what drives you. It's also important for you to understand what the employers are looking for. And what you want to do is match up yourself, your drivers, your skills with the positions that are available. So let's talk a little bit about those. Now we have four main sectors where people in the earth and space sciences are employed: academia, industry, government, and nonprofit. Another way to say nonprofit is a non-government organization. If you're outside the US, it's probably going to be an NGO. So those are the sectors. And the most common sector there is actually industry. Most people coming out of school think academia is where they're going to go. But I'll show you a slide in just a moment that shows where people have gone in the past and where you're very likely to end up. The graphic on the right-hand side of the screen, I want you to pay a little bit of attention to. This one comes from AGI, American Geosciences Institute. And what it's showing there are the sectors. It also shows a band for research. But what I want you to see is that, say you want to be a civil engineer or you want to be an environmental engineer in the engineering group. See how it cross-cuts all of the sectors except for maybe nonprofit? And I would say that it actually does cross-cut nonprofit. We have engineers that work here at AGU. So you can do all of the things that you may want to do, be a technical writer, be a communicator, be an environmental engineer. You can do almost all of those jobs in any of the sectors that are available. But you really just have to be aware of where to look for them. And when we were talking about your drivers, well, think about these different sectors like industry, government, academia, and nonprofit. Which one is likely, of those sectors, is likely to give you what you need or allow you to apply your drivers? Which one of those sectors, or what job within the sector, will you be able to apply your skills? Now the skills are going to map more closely to the job, like environmental engineer, and your drivers are likely to map more closely with the sector. But there's overlap. You have to take both into account. Now the employment sectors by degree are shown here. So for bachelor's level, almost all of you are going to go in industry. And we can say the same for masters. So this is looking at data from 2015, and those are graduates in 2015. So this is where the folks that graduated in 2015 ended up, right? The dark gray in this histogram, that's academia. So for PhDs, over half of you are going to end up in academia, but probably what you didn't know is almost half will end up in industry. And the red band over on the right-hand side, those are government jobs, and the blue is nonprofits. So the number of people that will end up in government jobs and nonprofits is relatively small. Most of you are going to go into industry somewhere, and if you have a PhD, a little over half of you will end up in academia. Now, let's talk a little bit about academia. And here, the jobs that people are most familiar with are the ones that are in the tenure track. You know, you go, you get your postdoc, then you start out as an assistant professor, you get tenure, you're promoted to an associate professor, and sometime before you die, you end up to be a full professor. But there are other jobs that are available in education. So remember the sectors, the jobs intersected several sectors. So we can look at non-tenure teaching and research positions. We can also look at non-teaching positions like being an instrumentation specialist or being a grant writer or a librarian or somebody that works in tech transfer. So looking at patents and other intellectual property. There are also several different types of academic institutions. The one that you're most familiar with is probably a doctoral granting research-intensive university. If you look at the number that are in the US, there's only 335 of those. There's actually more master's granting institutions, or comprehensive universities, as they're sometimes called. There's 741 of those. Baccalaureate colleges, where a bachelor's degree is the highest degree, 583. Associate colleges, well, those are community colleges, and there's about 1,500 of those. Now, what's a little misleading here is that if you're at a community college or maybe at a baccalaureate college, you're probably going to be the only one of the few scientists there. In fact, you may even teach more topics. You might teach a chemistry course in addition to a geosciences course, right? Where if you're at a doctoral university, small departments might be 4 or 5 people. Large departments could be 30 people that are in your area. So you might have more collaborators, and your job is also going to be very different. So at a doctoral university that's research intensive, it's going to be all about the research, not so much about the teaching. At an associate's level college or a community college, well, it's going to be about community service and teaching, because that's all there is. You do very little research at a community college. So the jobs are different. That's what aligns with your drivers, right? And the type of institution, the availability of jobs is also quite different. In industry, this is kind of a complex diagram, but not so much. This is starting on the left-hand side is, for those of you in academia, this is where you are, right? You're doing research, not so much development, as that's the D in R&D. So it's really about research, and that feeds into a pipeline, a value chain pipeline, where each step you're adding value to a product or a service. So it could be, the product could be something you manufacture, it could be an idea, so you might be a consultant, or you might be writing, doing research, or coming up with some sort of statement for somebody to use. But each step in the process, each person that's involved in industry needs to add value to that product, so that once it gets out to the end for the sales and marketing folks, they can sell it and the company makes money, because if they don't make money, they can't employ you, and they certainly can't pay you. And there's also a lot of support functions here, and those support functions might be like the folks that do the tech transfer, or that look after the patents and intellectual property, or HR. You know, you can't hire the right people unless you know what their characteristics are. So some of our scientists end up in HR functions as the hiring managers, right? So there are a lot of different types of positions available to you in industry. Now, where do Earth and space scientists end up? This is work coming out of AGI as well. And you can see for bachelor's level, the top 3 industry jobs are environmental sciences, followed by oil and gas, and then number 3, information sciences. Master's, number 1 is oil and gas, then environmental, and for number 3, we have a tie. It's between mining and research institutes. PhDs, now this is just the industry folks, right? So in industry, they're likely to go to be employed at a research institute. If they're not there, they're going to be in oil and gas, or they may go into a nonprofit NGO. Those are the 3 top jobs for them. Government, and I'm going to pull Eric in on this one, because he's more familiar with the government side of things. But these are the sectors, or the occupation groups, I should say, where the federal government is doing the most hiring. So number 1 is medical, dental, and public health. That doesn't seem like it's Earth and space sciences until you start to look at the types of positions that are in there. Remember, the federal government's been around for a long time, and they like to classify things as highly bureaucratic. So they've kept the same names, the same occupational groups for a long time, even though the jobs have evolved. So you have things like GeoHealth is in medical, dental, and public health. It's probably over on the public health side, right?
And with environmental engineering, that's another one that's over on the public health side.
Yeah. So give us some other examples, Eric, of things that we wouldn't expect, and what categories are they in?
So there's another cool job that you never really hear of as a student, or job sector called industrial health. That's another field that folks in the biogeochemistry and the environmental consulting fields can go into. You're basically looking at how safe buildings are and other workplaces or living areas, not in terms of their structure, but in terms of the chemicals within them. In terms of justice, the FBI is under the Justice Department, and they hire Earth and space scientists, more so on the Earth side. They specifically look for isotopic geochemists who can help them trace certain chemicals in bombs or in drugs to help them understand where those might have come from geographically. So there's some pretty exciting stuff you can get into that you don't necessarily think of.
Great. So let's look at some of the agencies that do the hiring. And the top agencies are shown here. So Veterans Affairs hired the most people in 2014. 2014 data is the latest hiring data that we're able to get. So we'll update this each year. But you can see Army and Navy and Air Force certainly hire quite a few people. We don't have so many in Veterans Affairs, but we do have a lot of folks that are employed by the military. The Justice Department, Eric just talked about the FBI jobs. Homeland Security, certainly we have people there. Health and Human Services. The Treasury, well, the Treasury not so much, but Department of Commerce, we have folks in. That's where NIST is. That's also where NOAA is, right?
Yep, it's in Commerce.
Yeah, and agriculture. So there are jobs located in each of these agencies. In fact, GeoHealth may be in Veterans Affairs, as well as many of these other agencies.
Yeah, and you can do Earth and space science research in some of these agencies. So the Army has the Army Corps of Engineers. They hire a lot of hydraulic engineers. Navy has the Office of Naval Research, which for decades was one of the primary funders of ocean sciences work, but it also hires a lot of ocean scientists. And the Department of Agriculture has a very large research division.
So that is the formal part of our presentation today. You know, we wanted to give you a feel for some of the things that are available to you. I'm going to do a brief commercial just so you know what's available to you at careers.agu.org. We have career advice that we're able to give, like the webinar today, mentoring programs that you may qualify for or want to be involved in, travel and research grants. This is the time to put in your applications if you need a grant to go to the fall meeting. We do professional development courses and ethical and professional guidelines. So it's been my pleasure to be with you today. We're going to take your questions to do some Q&A right now, and Eric's going to come in and help me with that. And I see that we already have a couple of questions.
Yeah, we had a couple from way back when we were talking about the skills that I think we should get to. So both Kendra and Teresa want to know what systems thinking is.
Okay, so problems are a lot bigger than they used to be. In the research topics that you would look at used to be where you could look at one thing. So in chemistry, it might be one molecule or one class of molecules. It could be a certain kind of technology. But these days, we have to look at larger systems like tectonic plates. You can't just look at one. You gotta look at all of them, and it's a global system, and it interacts with different types of science, different subsectors within the Earth and space sciences, and it requires a lot more collaboration. The thing that we need of scientists is to be able to look at the whole system and see how it interacts, though. A lot of the jobs that maybe we would have done before, where we would have gone out into the field and done sampling, well, we can use drones for that, or we can automate in some other way. I mean, we have a robot on Mars right now that's doing chemical analysis. So we don't need people to look at those individual skill sets. We need them to look at the broader system. What are all the elements involved in that system? How do they interact? And how would we measure those interactions or model those interactions so that we can predict what may happen down the road? Okay, I hope that got it. What else you got, Eric?
Okay, so Georgiana has the question. Oh man, a bunch of questions just came in. Keep typing in the chat box. So Georgiana's question is, are international folks eligible for government jobs?
Well, this one I get to hum and haw and say, well, it depends. So if it's defense related, probably not. If it's in any of the other agencies, especially if it's a contract position, then maybe. It will specifically tell you in the job description if citizenship is required. If it's not required, if they don't say it, then it's probably open to you.
And I'll just chime in that that applies for both federal and state and local. The position in a government job will always say if you need to have U.S. citizenship. Okay, so let's look for another one. Kendra asks, how does a person with a PhD market themselves in an industry setting? I've been told that PhD recipients are viewed as too specialized to be hired outside of research fields.
Well, I'm sorry, you should talk to other people. So if we look at the statistics, we know that PhDs have a lower employment rate. The higher your level of education, the lower the employment rate. But there's a lot of wives' tales or just these misinformation that people see. Again, look at the statistics, you'll be able to tell. And the perception is that PhDs, there aren't as many jobs for PhDs. I don't know, maybe there aren't as many jobs because there aren't as many PhDs. But if we look at the percentage of PhDs that are employed, there are more, the unemployment rate for PhDs is much lower than it is for masters, and it's much lower than bachelors. And for anybody with a higher ed degree, bachelor's or above, you're going to have an unemployment rate that's much, much lower than somebody with just a high school degree or no education. Okay, so how do you market yourself? That's going to be through your resume usually, and we'll have a webinar later on that. I think I have to talk to Nathaniel and see where that is on our roster, on our editorial calendar. But we have an article that will be coming out in EOS in a couple of months on resumes, and we'll follow it up with a webinar. And resume is really a marketing document, and it's about getting your best characteristics out there in front. So what do you do best? What's best about you? And for you, you need to practice telling stories. So if I ask you, what's your best characteristic? Why should I hire you for this job? Well, one, you need to have researched me first, or at least researched the job so you know what I'm looking for. So hopefully you've done that. And then think of a story that illustrates how you are able to apply the specific skills that I'm looking for. And I would want the story to have a happy ending, right? So what's the outcome? What were you able to do? Did you save money because you found a more economical way to do something? Did you figure out how to reduce risk because you were able to predict, create a model that shows where a river is likely to change course and wipe out a population if they were there, or a commercial development? So it's really going to be specific to you, and it's going to be the marketing piece is being able to tell the story that illustrates what makes you special. Okay. I know we have several other questions.
Oh yeah, they're coming in. They're great questions too. So Carlos asks a tough one, Dave. He wants to know how hard it's going to be to get a job in academia in the future.
Okay, well, we're predicting that in academia it's going to get tougher. So there are a lot of folks that are already employed in academia, right? And they're not going anywhere anytime soon. We may have some positions that become available because the people that have the positions now are baby boomers. But in academia, we don't have the driver for retirement. So for industry, government jobs, we know that when people hit 65, they're probably out of there. For the government jobs, after 65, you don't get an increased benefit for working longer. It's not going to increase your retirement pay. So, so government jobs, you can almost set a clock and know that that the folks that are in those positions are going to move out when they hit 65 or earlier. Industry, it's a lot of the same. But in academia, you get people hanging on for a long time. I guess the good thing about academic jobs is you live a long time, and they stay there until they just can't go anyplace else. So there's a backlog. That's bad. There's also a shift towards non-tenure. So instructor level positions. So if you're willing to take those kind of contract level instruction positions, there will be growth in that area, but we're predicting or we're seeing a trend towards a slight decrease in tenure type positions, and it's getting tighter for funding. That's cyclical, but right now we're going down in the availability of funding. It's getting a little tighter. So that's probably not the answer you wanted, but that's what the numbers show us. What else you got?
So Cecilia is asking, what are some resources to find jobs in the geosciences other than USA Jobs or general job posting sites like Indeed.com?
Well, this is as a promotion, but we have a job board too. AGU has a job board at findajob.agu.org. You don't have to go there, but we'd love for you to. We try and pull in jobs there. But the other job boards are going to have jobs. LinkedIn is a great place to both be listed, so you should have a profile on LinkedIn, especially if you're looking outside of academia. Now, academia doesn't use LinkedIn nearly as much as industry and nonprofits and other sectors of employment, but LinkedIn is a great place to be found, okay? And that's getting back to our conversation before. You need to think about what makes you special, and in your executive summary, make sure that that shows up, right? That you state it well. Let's see, other places. Companies now, all of them, have websites, and so if you're interested in a company and working for that company, be sure and check out their job board, because the job market is such that they can list it there for free, and then Indeed.com and the other job aggregators are going to come and scrape it for free, so they don't have to pay. So the first place it's going to show up is on that company job board. And then also you should network. So a good way to find out about jobs is to talk to those that already have them. So talk to the people that graduated from your group. So I think you're at William and Mary. Where are the people at William and Mary get jobs? Where are they now? When they leave on their graduation, say, hey, I'd love to keep in touch. Why don't we exchange cards? Let's exchange emails so that you keep that relationship alive, and you know at least where they go, even if you don't like them. It's a small world. You're going to run into them again, so you just need to figure out how you're going to like them. What else, Eric?
Okay, so Dario is asking, he's got a couple questions in, but we'll go with the first one. PhDs are infamous for being bad at negotiating salaries with industry. How can I know what salary I should really expect?
Yeah, I think it depends on the PhD. It's really about experience there, and you've got to realize what your worth is.
Okay.
Sorry, it looks like you turned off my webcam, so I was just looking at that.
Oh, people were saying it was coming in just black, so
Okay.
clearing it up.
Okay, so so when you're negotiating, there are several websites you can go to. So you can go to glassdoor.com. If it's a chemistry-related job, the American Chemical Society has a tool that you can use. You can also look at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So if you go to bls.gov in the United States, you can see the average wage, starting wage. You can see what the average is for the whole industry, right? So that'll give you an idea. It's not going to zero it in on a specific number, but in the beginning, this is going to be a negotiation. So what I usually say is whoever starts, whoever gives the number first, well, they're at the disadvantage. So if you can get them to give you a number first, that's better, because that's your beginning of the negotiation, and you know that they lowballed it, so you want to go up a little bit above that, right? If they force you to give a number, or if you've been employed before, they may ask you what you're paying, and you're going to have to tell them, because later on they'll ask you for your tax returns, and it's going to be on there. So, so go ahead and give them the right answer. But if you have any wiggle room at all, say any reasonable offer will be considered. You know, leave it open and just say, I'm open to your offer. Get them to give you an offer, and then you can negotiate up. If you have to give them a number first, then look at, be aware that the Bureau of Labor and Statistics averages are going to be for somebody that's more experienced, that's been out there for a while. It's looking at everybody that's in that field, even the ones that have been working for 50 years. So, so you're going to be towards the low end of the range at a starting salary. But that'll give you a range, and when you give them that number, you know, you can tell them, I am open to other offers, and I would be honest about where I got the source. So you can say that this is what the Bureau of Labor and Statistics shows, or this is what Glassdoor shows, and I would expect to get compensation similar to that. One more caveat. So if you're a woman, and you're looking at the salaries, many times they'll give you the breakdown of what the average salary is for a woman, what the average salary is for a man. Don't use the number for average of women. Use the one for the average for men. You should be paid the same amount. They should not discriminate against you. So, so quote that number and say that's what you would expect.
All right, and just to have some more shameless self-promotion, Dario, we actually had a webinar in May on getting to yes, learning to negotiate more effectively, and salary negotiation was a part of this. So if you go to webinars.aju.org and then click on professional development, you'll be able to scroll down and find that the webinar from last month and watch that recording. Okay, so we've had a bunch more come in, but I think we had someone earlier who hasn't been answered yet. So Christine asked if we could specify the types of companies or roles that fall under the environmental sciences industry category.
Okay, so I'm going to go back in my slide here. It's going to take it a second to catch up for you. Let me turn off my webcam so you can see the slide. And so environmental could be environmental research at the very beginning. It also could be looking at environmental impacts in the product development area or in quality control, regulatory. Actually, environment can show up in any of these areas because in manufacturing and supply chain, you're also looking at impact on your supply chain. And you may be looking at environmental factors like, you know, I don't, Mars Company is any of the food companies, but Mars, when they're manufacturing, they have to figure out where they're going to get their peanuts, right? It has to be an uninterrupted supply. So Earth and Space Science plays a big part here because we're looking at the weather, we're looking at potential pollutants. You know, is there something nearby that could contaminate the crop? So those are some of the types of jobs in environmental. In the product development, you're figuring out how to make this product develop predictably and consistently of the same quality. So you want to look at all the environmental factors that may impact that process. Quality control and regulatory, well, that's probably going to be where most of our environmental people are, because the environmental regulations, is the company meeting those regulations, and are they have to document how they're meeting those regulations. There may be something in sales and marketing, but it's probably just having an understanding of that field makes you better able to address the market. So here, what I mean is, so if somebody's looking at a food product and they want to know if it's manufactured in an environmentally sustainable way, you're going to be the one that would come up with the background or be able to document how it's environmental and sustainable. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, okay, so for our next one, going back to Kate. Kate asks, what types of roles are there for Earth and space scientists in the nonprofit sector?
Well, you could be like me, or like Eric or Leslie, any of the other folks that are on the line today helping to put this webinar together. We provide services for people in the Earth and Space Sciences, and I have my PhD. It's in chemistry. It's not in the Earth and Space Sciences, but it's related. Eric, yours is in hydrology. And I think Leslie's not on audio right now. Leslie's in Nepal.
Environmental science.
Yeah. So what that helps us do is figure out what's important. You know, if we're going to provide a product or a service, or we're going to give advice, we need to understand what affects you. And having come from that world, we know the problems. We had the problems same as you. Maybe not exactly the same, but we had many of the same problems, and so we are able to predict what we need to address, what we need to develop. We're also better able to understand. So if you come up to somebody that doesn't have a scientific background that works here, and most of the people that work at AGU do not have a scientific background. In fact, we don't want them to. You don't want me to be the meeting planner. You want somebody that actually studied that in the hospitality industry and gets how hotels work, or understands how restaurants work to handle that side of it, because that's not my fundamental understanding. But it helps when we're developing a product, especially for scientists, to have the understanding of some of the challenges they're going through, so that we can address them directly.
And just to add on to that, the nonprofit sector it's actually a pretty big sector. It goes far beyond just scientific societies. I mean, even the NFL is technically a nonprofit for what it's worth. But there are a lot of environmental nonprofits. If we think about Sierra Club or the Nature Conservancy, these are nonprofit organizations that actually hire scientists and do research. So it goes beyond just support of science. There are some nonprofits that actually do some research as well. But once again, you're not going to get paid what you would get paid to do research, say, for industry, or maybe even academia. Once you get into the nonprofit world, you need to have different goals in mind than just making money. But we enjoy it.
Yeah, if giving back and altruism is number one for you, well, this is one of the places you can do that.
Okay, so we've got time for probably one more question.
Okay.
Let's see. What do you feel like, Dave? So here's a pointed one, and I think it can go broader than that as well, than just how the question's phrased. But Dario asks, I have a J visa and will have to go back to my country for at least 2 years before being able to come back to the U.S. How do I keep in touch with potential employers? And I think this can be broadened to just how do you stay in touch with, how do you build contacts and keep in touch with those contacts when you're not actively looking for a job, but you may need them in the future?
Okay, so this is, I'm going to take this to the networking question. We won't go too far into depth, but basically anyone that you've ever met, anyone that you're ever likely to see is a potential network contact. You should figure out a system. I'm not very good at systems, at least not making myself follow systems. I can come up with systems. I get that part. So I have to make a way for me to do that. I'm also an introvert, so I just hate going to receptions. I hate them. So when we're doing the things that you hate, that's the one I hate. But I can fake it. So I've got to get out to those different events. I've got to meet people, and the way I deal with it is I give myself an assignment. So I'll say, you don't get to come out of that room until you have 3 business cards from specific people that you're going to follow up with. Okay, so if that's your challenge, you can give yourself an assignment and get it done. But be aware that there are other network contacts. It's not just people that you know, it's people that maybe your parents know, or your brother or your sister, or a friend of a friend. And being aware of who other people know and how they know them and what the context is, what they do for a living, can be very helpful. One of our contractors, the last contractor we hired for a marketing study, it's actually a lady that was standing in front of me for a spin class at the gym. So, we were bored. We had to get there early before all the bikes were taken. And while we were waiting in line, we were just talking about, well, what do you do? What do you do? I told her what I did. Turns out her mom is a member of AGU, and she's in marketing. I was looking for a marketing person, so she had the background in science and was able to understand our organization because she grew up in our organization with her mom. So it was a cool connection, kind of random, but it's even those random situations can be optimized if we're looking for ways that we can connect. So keep track of where your colleagues get jobs. Keep in touch with them. Not just your lab, but other labs around you. Or if you're an undergraduate, keep track of the folks that are in your classes. Where are they going? And if you have to go away for a while, it doesn't mean that you have to completely, it's taking you out of the job market for the U.S. completely, because most of the companies in the U.S. are global. So maybe you just work for a different branch of the company overseas. And then there's just a lot of information on the internet. So if you are interested in a specific company, stay on their website, follow their website, see if you can get an internship, see if they'll let you work remotely, see if there's some way that you can contribute to their business. Okay.
Okay, Dave. Well, we're coming up on the hour. Do you want to take one more question, or should we sign things off?
Let me try and do one, a 1-minute question.
Okay. We're going to go to with Cecilia's. I think we can cut this to a minute. I've heard that getting a PhD isn't entirely necessary for a career unless you want to pursue academia. Is this true?
Yeah, you don't have to get a PhD. If you're going to teach at a university, you need a PhD. For certain jobs in industry, you need a PhD. But there's a heck of a lot of them that you don't need a PhD. Also, be aware that what PhDs do, or what they're expected to do, is very different than what a bachelor's level person or a master's level person is expected to do. So look at the job listings, just sort through them and see what interests you. See what level of degree they're asking for, and figure out what you want to do with your life based on that. Not just because everybody else is getting a PhD, right? There's no reason why you have to do that. The only reason why you would want to do that is if it's going to lead you to a job that's going to be fulfilling and that you want to do. So thanks everybody for coming today. We're going to capture the questions here. We may answer them in a blog, on the job blog, or some other way. We'll see you in AGU Connect, our online community as well. And we sure appreciate you joining us today.
Yep, thanks all. Thank you, Dave. And remember that the email will be sent out in a few days with the link to the online recording, as well as the link to the EOS article on finding your fit. Thanks, everyone.